Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the End Zone Scoop podcast. I'm Dayna. This is Shona. It's just going to be the two of us girls today. Liz was unable to join us. And so it is just going to be us. But we have so much fun things to talk about. Yesterday was exhausting, Shona. It was exhausting. It was exhausting because there was so much bizarreness going on in that first game with the Niners and the Eagles. I just kept sitting there being like, well, what else can happen? Like, I just was so confused. And then in the second game was the game we expected it to be. And it was so good. It was just a long day of football, even though it was just 2 days. I think it was just emotions. Were you lucky enough to watch any of it? I know it's a bad time zone thing for you.
No, I did see the 49ers game and kind of thought I was watching Space Jam 3 potentially, where they lost all their mojo and cool stuff and then they needed to get Michael's special stuff and they didn't get any. But yeah, it was so bizarre. I feel to me it wasn't the 49ers that we'd seen over the few weeks before. Like it just felt like things were I mean, the officiating. Oh my goodness. I could probably talk about that for about an hour and I won't, but I could. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the Bengals game, but I knew that was going to be such a good one. And when I woke up, I immediately looked at the result and I was like, Mahomes is probably going to be like walking about like Woody when he comes out the box being like, hey guys, I've arrived, because he's finally beat Joe Burrow. So, I thought it was how I thought it would go. I thought the Niners Eagles though was going to be a lot closer. I thought if anyone could maybe take it to the Eagles and not let them get to the Super Bowl, it would be the 49ers, but they were playing with like a fourth string quarterback, I believe. So
I 4th, 5th, 12th. I'm not sure what he is. God love Josh Johnson. Here's the interesting thing about Josh Johnson for those of you guys who might not know. He's Marshawn Lynch's cousin. So I'm always cheering for him. He's been on 12 different teams. He's been all over. He's been around forever. He is a perennial backup and made a great career of it, right? And so that is great. And yet at the same time, it was not ideal for San Francisco. Let's just put it that way. So I will tell you that
hit on for me. I loved it.
Didn't mind it so much as Seahawks fans that we are. But here's the interesting thing. The Eagles, they did not look perfect either. They looked like they were struggling, which makes sense. They were playing against the best defense in football, without question. And the best defense in football looked great. The Niners just had no answer to what Jalen Hurts and the rest of that crew could do. Understandably so. And so then you had the nightmare of Brock Purdy getting hurt. I wish, and that bothered me. I felt terrible for him, but also I'm like, this is not the game. We're trying, as evaluators and as reporters, we're trying to evaluate what Brock Purdy is going to bring to the table. And is he going to be, the one for San Francisco over Trey Lance and what that's going to look like. And so to me, it's like, we didn't get a chance to see them against some serious competition. And that was a little disappointing to me because I want to know more of what's coming from that kid. But then you bring in Josh, who then also concussion flat on it. You knew the minute that hit happened. I looked at my husband. I said, oh my God, they are really going to have Christian McCaffrey be the quarterback of this team. I mean, it was just like funny and terrible.
Not how you want your championship game to go, like at all, do you? You'd be like, I'll take this week one, so we can get like that over with and you not have to experience like probably everything happening to you all at once in the space of an hour game. But that is exactly what happened to the 49ers yesterday.
Right. Shona, oh my God, you have to post. Graham posted in our comments. You have to hover over it and so everyone can see it. It is hilarious. He wrote, good evening, ladies. I almost didn't make it tonight as I was next in line to be the 49ers quarterback. God love you, Graham. That is so true. And it is hilarious. And then Christian McCaffrey was like, wait, why am I changing helmets? Like you could tell the complete confusion in his face. And it was funny. But then Brock Purdy did come back in. But obviously, with that elbow injury, it's much like for people who know baseball, it's like a Tommy John. Like they sometimes have to have Tommy John surgery. It's that same elbow type. So it has to do everything to do. It's not that he couldn't move his arm. They can't grip. And that's why he was just handing that ball. If he could hold the ball, but he could not hold it tight enough to get a good spin on it, to get it to throw. So that's why they had to use him the way they did.
Wasn't there like a rumor that that's what Josh Allen had earlier in the season, but
I think so. I think they might have skirted around it, and it probably wasn't surgical. I mean, because there are different levels, obviously, of that injury, and that's what they're waiting to hear about Purdy today, whether or not it'll be surgical. Because if it is, then that's a much longer recovery than just 8 weeks than a regular one would be. So that could be, but we'll see. I felt bad. As much as it's very difficult for me to feel bad for the San Francisco 49ers, but I did feel bad for them just because they really were a fantastic team this year, and they really did deserve a chance to kind of put their best foot forward, and that was taken from them. So I felt bad, but who I didn't feel bad for was the Philadelphia Eagles. I love that team. I love everything about that team. I even love their fan base, and everyone hates their fan base. I don't. I think their fan base is super fun.
But quite obnoxious.
They really, really are. Yeah. Which is funny to me because I usually like I'm a Richard Sherman fan. So I normally like a little bit of obnoxious. And we're going to talk about this during we talk the Chiefs games until Travis Kelce started running his mouth. And I'm like, God, I hate that kid. So anyway, it's a complete two-sided thing. But what's interesting to me about this Philadelphia team is I said this, I think before when we did this show, I've said it in other podcasts. It is the most complete team in football right now. They are just hitting it on defense. You could tell Jalen Hurts is not 100%. You can just tell, right? Like he's not as good as he was at the beginning of the season, but he now gets 2 weeks off. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of difference. I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things coming out of the Eagles. I love Jason Kelce. He's one of my favorite football players outside of Seattle. And so I'm thrilled for him. His brother. Again, we'll talk about that in a minute. And I love Brandon Graham. Don't even get me started about Travis Kelce. But so here's the thing. I love the elder statesman on the Philadelphia. Like I love Brandon Graham. I love some of those guys who've played for them. Fletcher Cox. How can you not love Fletcher Cox? And so I love that. But then they have so many good youthful players too. I'm really, really happy for the Eagles. And they got a lot of crap at the beginning of the year about how they had such an easy schedule and how they cruised through. And that's how they made it so far. No, they proved it last night that they deserve to be there.
Yeah, I think as well, I was, doing some stats and stuff, and the Eagles ran for 148 yards as a team. And like, that's quite a lot for the Niners have one of they're a well-coached defense. Like you know that, like, and the Eagles completely nullified it, and they found their weakness with it. They were looking at them doing that curveballs, and they just completely changed their tactic and their game. And you can see that it was throwing the 49ers, like you said earlier, that they had no idea how to respond to how the defense was working out their offense.
I am so sorry. My computer is having a little bit of an issue. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
You just wiggled a little bit on me, and I didn't catch the last little bit of what you said. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. I said that what you said earlier was the 49ers had no answer to Eagles adjusting their game.
Absolutely. I apologize. I know.
Yeah. They found the 49ers weakness in their offense, and they worked out how to utilize it against them.
Right.
Game. That's what I said.
Really? No, I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, it was like all of a sudden it's like my picture went a little wonky, and I'm like, what is happening? It's very strange. So anyway, yes, I agree. And so I enjoyed this game. Is not the game we should have gotten. I really thought that both of these games were going to be blockbuster games. Obviously for certain reasons, that didn't happen. Injuries suck. They just do. But I do think the right team made it to the Super Bowl. So sorry. But then you look at this other game.
Wow. What game?
So here's the thing. I live in Kansas City, and this fan base was scared to death of this game. They did not want the Bengals. They would have much rather played the Bills. They did not want to have to face Burrows. And then the mayors got into it, which I think is the stupidest tradition on the planet. And they're like, giving each other a bad time. And the players are talking a lot of crap. And Cincinnati had every right to talk a lot of crap. They beat them 3 times in a row.
Absolutely.
For all those Chiefs fans out there who are like, we beat you, ha. It's like, yeah, you did, but you're still 1-3. I'm just saying. That's just, it's still not a great record. But here's
So
the
true.
interesting thing.
So true.
What Patrick Mahomes did on his ankle was amazing. And you could tell toward the end of the game, he was really limping on it a bit. He was doing that little funky hop that football players do. That was pure determination on his part. You have to give him complete and total props for that, because that high ankle sprain, traditionally, you're out for 6 to 8 weeks. So it was just sometimes 4. It depends, but it really was miraculous that he could play at all. They had a lot of players that went out. They had a lot of players that were beat up. Travis Kelce was questionable up until the start of the game, which I think was a little bit of gamesmanship, because he didn't look like he was questionable in any way, shape, or form. So I'm thinking, there might have been a little gamesmanship going on there. But I do think that the Chiefs were ready for what Cincinnati was going to bring. And Cincinnati, why do they do this to themselves? Every time, the first half of the game, they're terrible. They look awful. They throw interceptions. They can't run the ball. They look terrible. And then they have like a lightning rod underneath of them in the second half. Now, they started to look better that last series of the first half, but my God, they put themselves in a hole so many times. Although, full credit to the Bengals defense, they did hold those first 2 drives of the Chiefs to field goals, and that was really impressive.
Yeah, I knew this, like I said earlier, I knew this game was going to be a close one. And I know Cincinnati fans will be screaming until the day comes home about that referee call in the fourth quarter. The problem I have with that is, and I say it even to Seattle fans as well, is that you kind of need to win before this call. Like, you can't rely your whole game on a bad refereeing call. I know the officiating this season has been bonkers, to say the least. It's been off the scale. But I always feel like you can't be relying on one last drive to win the game. I know that makes it not very important, but you try to see my point. You can't just be like, right, that's the reason we lost. We lost because of the officiating. Other factors have got to be in play, like you mentioned. They didn't really turn up for the first half, and then in the second part of the game, they did. So it's like, it swings and roundabouts, I feel, when it comes to that. But I feel overall it was a fantastic game, a really close one. Mahomes is just doing ridiculous things on his banged up body. He'll be praying for his body to be ready to go in 2 weeks, because he won't want a repeat performance when he had to play in the Super Bowl on a banged up ankle a few years ago against the Bucs.
Right.
When Tom Brady won. So I'm really hoping for a really good game in the Super Bowl. But yeah, I feel out of the 2 games yesterday, obviously the Bengals Chiefs was a lot more
better. Yeah. So, Kate, a friend of mine that I do another podcast with, she said something on last week's Our Turf show that was kind of hit the nail on the head. And I think that's where a lot of this, Twitter's a disaster today. Like, I posted that, like, between ex-players fighting with rookie players, fighting with the media, and they're arguing about, rigged NFL, and the fans going after that poor kid from Cincinnati, which is just heartbreaking to me. It's like, I don't like Twitter today. I'm not enjoying it. But when
I think there was a Seattle fan who was like, I'm just logging off of Twitter today. It's not a nice place.
It wasn't. It's not a good place today. But Kate said something last week, and I think that's where some of this animosity is coming from, and it's called Mahomes fatigue. And we had Brady fatigue for years. That's all we heard about: Brady. And then it seems to be almost even worse. Now, this is no dig at Patrick Mahomes. I like Patrick Mahomes. I think he's a great player. I think he's a good egg. Like, so I would say he's a good egg. Like, he's just a nice kid. You know what I mean? And he will stand there and talk to people all day long. Like, Patrick Mahomes is fantastic. He's also an amazing player. But there seems to be a bit of a fatigue when the same team goes to the Super Bowl, 3 out of the last 5 years. And so I think that a lot of that animosity kind of goes towards that. Well, they don't care. The Chiefs fans don't care. They, just like the Patriots fans don't care. They don't care. That's
It's like
their
the
guy.
it's like the opposite team do not care.
I
Like,
know.
so
And
you can spout this all you want, like, on Twitter, and the thing is, if it happened to your team, you take it. Like,
right,
if
you enjoy
yeah,
it.
if you're on the
And
opposite side, you'd be like, "Oh, yeah,
yeah,
that's right. It's a
it's like I
give me
don't
that
care that
flag."
you're sick of DK Metcalf. I want him to keep talking about it. But and so here's the interesting thing. I think that that's been an interesting shift because we were so excited about the new kids, and now it's like they're annoying. But I found that on Twitter today. But let me tell you, I have to say this about Travis Kelsey. Okay, so
Wow.
I have met Travis Kelsey twice in real life, and I was like this both times. Like he was fine. He's very charismatic. He's very,
Mhm.
people were like women love him and he loves that women love him.
Ooh,
But here's the
ooh,
interesting thing about it. He is a 33-year-old frat boy who does not know
yeah.
when to just stop it. And I think that's why I like Jason so much. Jason is fantastic. And I had great interviews with Jason. But Travis Kelsey running his mouth just makes the other fan bases hate them even more. This has nothing to do with Patrick Mahomes. Yes, the media loves
Yeah.
him. But I understand that the mayor of Cincinnati ran his mouth a little bit and needed to be called on the carpet. Love that. Let Quentin Lucas, who's the mayor of Kansas City, let him do that. I didn't think it was appropriate on the stage that he did it. And to call him a jabroni, which there's some question mark whether or not that's actually an appropriate word that he should be saying. And so I think but people find him funny and engaging or completely annoying. And so I think it's what's interesting with the Chiefs winning this. I think more people wanted Cincinnati to win, but I think that's just because they're sick of the Chiefs, right?
I mean, it would have been nice for I think it would have been nice for the Bengals to get back to the Super Bowl. I feel like they are a team that can win. But they broke my heart because they beat the Bills again. But and like I think it would have been good to see how the Bengals would have fared against the Eagles. Um, because you're right, like the Chiefs have made it so many years, like like you said,
And
3 out of
credit
4.
to them. They're a
Credit to
fantastic
them.
team. I mean,
Credit to them.
they
They
still
are good,
made it
and
this
they have a
far
oh,
even
I
without
cannot
Hill,
I
you
could
know?
not say any more complimentary words about Andy Reid. I couldn't.
I
Like,
know. He's so
he's
good.
he's
He's
so
so
good.
good.
Like, I could literally just, talk about how great his mustache is for, like, 10 minutes, and I wouldn't even, scratch the surface of his personality,
Right.
but yeah, I feel the comment from Kelsey, I can
Good
understand
Lord, that kid. I just want to be
why.
like, stop it.
I feel like he watched a bit too much Royal Rumble on Saturday, I think, like, he was enjoying himself watching the WWE, and he was like, "Yeah, Cody Rhodes, he's going to WrestleMania," and then he's gone and, you know
I know.
yeah,
I know. I just want to be like, really? But it's okay. People love him. And he is without question, an amazing football player.
Oh,
So
yeah,
full
totally.
credit to
I
that.
won't take that away from
Yeah,
him, but
not at all.
maybe
He's
just
just
know
like,
your role and shut
you're
your
a
mouth.
PR nightmare, my friend. Sorry. But
No,
so
yeah. Know your
yeah.
role and shut your mouth, Travis,
Yeah,
that's why.
exactly. But I'm happy for the Chiefs. I'm happy for my friends who are Chiefs fans. This town
Yeah.
is going to be obnoxious for 2 weeks. Like I'm kind of glad I'm going on vacation. But it's going to be an interesting game. Now, when you come down to the Super Bowl matchup, I think this is a really well matched Super Bowl. I
Yeah.
think that it's you have strength on strength. They have kind of the same number of injuries, the same type of injuries, quarterbacks that aren't maybe 100%. Both these teams desperately need these 2 weeks off, without question, desperately need these 2 weeks off. And so I think that it's going to be a well played game. I don't think that we'll have a blowout one way or the other. It could be a really, really good game. Unless, of course, which happens sometimes in the Super Bowl, one team just doesn't show up. I mean, that happens
Hopefully not.
sometimes. Yeah. And so I think it's going to be a fun Super Bowl. So we'll just have to kind of see where it lands. Jalen Hurts versus Patrick Mahomes. That's the two number one seeds and the two top, vote getters for MVP. It's kind of the way it should be, right?
Yeah, and also they're making history as well because they're the first 2 Black,
Mhm.
NFL quarterbacks to ever appear, like, on either team, in a
Mhm.
Super Bowl. So that's
Yeah.
also incredible for them and for the league as well.
Mhm.
Um, and if you look at it, like, I was just looking at the Eagles, they've gone 7 straight games without generating multiple turnovers. So that is quite concerning. Though they have recovered 3 fumbles, and that was against the 49ers. But they
What? Does it count?
not really. And then so I would say the most complete offense they've faced on the road to the Super Bowl is probably the Cowboys on Christmas Eve,
Mhm.
and where he threw 3 touchdown passes, and also threw for 374 yards. Obviously, they did lose, but it kind of shows that their defense can be pierced, and it can, and
Mhm.
it's a slight reason for concern, I would say. However, on the other hand, the offensive line, check. Offensive playmakers, check. Quality
Mhm.
players at 3 levels of defense, check. Like,
Yeah.
where else do you want me to go, like, in the list of,
Right.
They've also gone, they've gone 70 sacks during the regular season, which is 3rd
Mhm.
most in the NFL history. But then if you look on the other hand, it's not just all about the Eagles. The Chiefs are actually ranked 2nd, to 55 sacks for this season, to the Eagles. So they are also, like, they have, they have positives to look at on their defense side
Yeah,
too.
Chris Jones, Frank Clark, they both look
Yeah,
so good in last night's
exactly.
game. And Frank Clark had been hurt for the last few games of the season, and so it was good to see him kind of at full force last night. Here's the interesting thing with the one interesting stat that I didn't realize until last night when they were talking about it on air was that the Kansas City Chiefs are ranked like 31st in third and short yardage. Like they're not
Ooh,
so good at that. And so I'm like, oh, the Eagles can feast on that. Whereas the Kansas City Chiefs, have such a good line. Jalen doesn't always run the best for his like. Now he's a great running quarterback. That's what I'm talking about. But like having to scramble and that sort of thing, they struggle a little bit with that. So here's what's interesting to me: you have these playmakers on both teams,
absolutely.
but when you look at Kansas City, who's the one person, if you can contain, you can stop this game? And that's Travis Kelce.
Yeah,
If
I was just
you
gonna
can
say.
contain Travis Kelce, I think these Eagles, and no team has figured out how to do it. I always say, why is no one on 87? Why is 87 all by
Yeah,
himself back in the back? You
I
can't tell
feel
me defensive coordinators aren't trying. They're just not
I always
succeeding.
feel like, right, he could probably run out the stadium, get himself a wee hot dog, some fries, a Coke, come back in, and they still wouldn't know how to fight him on the field.
Yeah, and complete and total credit to that defensive coordinator because you know that the other team knows that they have to stop Travis Kelce. They just can't do it. And
No.
so that is going to be probably the big assignment for the next couple of weeks for the Eagles for sure. It's going to be a lot of
Yeah,
fun.
and the Chiefs are also leading in scoring. They're 28.2 points per game, and yards per play is 6.4 in the regular season. So that's obviously something that they're going against the best defense, so I would say. So it's going to be interesting to see
Mhm.
how this offense can go against this defense, because I would say that's the 2 sides I would say is better for the other team.
Mhm.
The Eagles is all around, but,
Mhm.
Hurts
He
is
has a
kind of
shoulder injury. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
he is on an injury. So I'm really interested to see how the best side of the Chiefs faces the best side of the Eagles.
Yeah. It'll be a good I'm hoping it'll be a good game. I I'm not gonna lie. When these games started last Sunday, people were like, "Dana, who do you want to win?" And I said, "Anybody but San Francisco. I don't care who goes to the Super Bowl
Wow.
as long as it's not San
No,
Francisco."
I'm actually
And that
well,
is pure rivalry. That's just
yeah,
what that
I
is.
agree.
I give complete credit to how good San Francisco is, and it's
You know
annoying.
what's nice is I can watch this Super Bowl and be like, "I don't care who wins.
Right. Exactly.
I don't care who
Exactly.
wins." It's such
Exactly.
a nice feeling because you watch the Super Bowl last year, and I really didn't want the Rams to win at all. And I was like, "They're gonna win." And then, the year before, didn't want Brady to win. The year before that, San Francisco. So no, this is a nice year for me. This is a nice year for me where there's no team in that I have to be like, I really don't want you to win.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. I hope people enjoy it. All right, let's move on just a little bit from these games because we could talk about them all day and you could break down
We could.
strategy and players and all that other good stuff. But we want to talk about a couple of other things too. So there's a bit of controversy, let's just say,
Mm,
around some of these end of year awards, and that's of course ESPN honors, and that comes from the AP awards, and you look at the All Pros and all this, but what we're talking about is like offensive rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year, comeback player of the year, all of those. Now, a lot of those awards have already been given out. We know that different news outlets give their awards throughout this kind of the whole month of January once the playoff starts. But the big ones are the ones that come the day, is it the day before? Is it the Saturday before Super Bowl? Yeah, I think that it is. And so I think that those ones are interesting. But there's a bit of controversy. And I will tell you, I've gotten in a couple of pretty serious arguments about one award in particular, and that is Coach of the Year.
Oh, Dayna,
I
get me
tell
off my
you, like,
soapbox.
I literally got into it with someone who I don't normally argue with about this. And I was just like, absolutely not. So here's the interesting. They announced their finalists, and for the most part, I'm hoping I get them all. So it's Dable, Shanahan, the Eagles head coach Shirani. I always say his name wrong. And then the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. So let me do this. Coach.
So it's Sean McDermott, Kyle Shanahan.
It's McDermott. Yeah. McDermott, Shanahan. Let's see.
It's Nick Sirianni.
Sirianni. I always say it wrong. And Brian Dable.
And then you've got Doug Peterson.
Doug. God, I think he's going to get shorthanded because of that game against Keith Chiefs. But anyway, here's what's interesting to me about this. And we have some questions in our chat. We're going to get to those. We got some questions from Twitter. We are going to get those too. I don't want people to think that we've forgotten them. But here's the interesting thing. I have said straight up since they made the playoffs, Brian Dable, the head coach of the New York Giants, deserves Coach of the Year. He got that team. First of all, he kept Saquon Barkley healthy for a whole year. Congratulations. And he took Daniel Jones and took that team to the playoffs. The Giants were not a joke this year. They were good, and they were playing teams well. They had a few hiccups here and there, but for the most part, they looked great, and they did it with nothing. He had a quarterback and a running back, guys. That's all he had, and I was so impressed with it. Interesting to me is that, and this is the argument I got into, was that there are people out there who think that Kyle Shanahan, should get Coach of the Year. And I vehemently disagree. I think there are 3 coaches that should get it before him. And not one of them is Pete Carroll. I'm not going to say Pete Carroll because they did have a 6-game losing streak, and that's not what Coaches of the Year do. But I will tell you this. I think that Peterson, Dable, or Shirani should get it first. Without question.
I'm going left field. I think someone's been massively snubbed, and it's not Pete Carroll.
Who?
Dan Campbell from the Detroit Lions.
Oh, God, love him. He is so fun, isn't he? I get that.
I mean, yeah, obviously the start of their season was not the best, but what a turnaround for a team, right? That has Goff as QB because the guy's lost major confidence and now is finding his rhythm again at the Detroit Lions. He ended up with a 9-8 season after winning just 3 games in their first year as head coach. And then you got people saying that Kyle Shanahan, who has the best roster, should have the best roster when they're healthy. Why would he be Coach of the Year? He's literally been cherry-picked like the best team ever. So, no. I'm good. I will not get off this soapbox. Kyle Shanahan better not win Coach of the Year because he's not.
I agree. And that is my exact reasoning too. I see multiple coaches, Campbell being one of them. Honestly, to be honest with you, Doug Peterson and Dable, they took teams that did not have the most outstanding rosters and turned them into these teams that were contenders. The Lions were in it till the end, right?
Yeah.
And so I look at Shanahan, and yes, finally the argument I got done with was like, Dayna, you just don't think coaching matters. Of course I think coaching matters. But the interesting thing is with Shanahan and McDermott, that's a very good point, Graham, about that McDermott should be talked about in this too, is that they had stacked rosters. I think the Niners have the best roster in the league. And I think it's like you take these insanely talented blue chip players and you get them to do blue chip things. No, I don't see the rise there. Now, yes, he went through 4 quarterbacks. He did. But there was a comment on Twitter yesterday. Hold on, Shona. Let me tell you this. Because I want your opinion on this. There was a comment on Twitter yesterday that hit the nail on the head. It said, and I think it was Rosenthal that said it. And he said, the injuries that have plagued the Niners during Shanahan's tenure is almost, mystic level. That's not an exact quote, but it was like, it's absolutely confusing. And yet they're still managed to be in there, and congratulations to that. But it is true. It's like, and so I flippantly to the person I was having an argument with, I'm like, well, coach of the year maybe should figure out how to not get every single one of his quarterbacks hurt. Granted, yes, I understand that that is a fluke, but it seems to happen to them year after year after year after year after year. I don't think a coach with that talented of a roster should end up with coach of the year. I think it should be a coach that has brought more from his players than expected.
Absolutely, and I've actually said this before about, Kyle Shanahan, like, what does he do? Like, what do him and his coaching staff do in training or in their drills? Or it's gotta be something because it's injury plague. Like, it's injury plague season after season after season, and then, yeah, they manage to turn it around and are always in the hunt for the playoffs and the Super Bowl,
Always.
but it's like how does it get to that point where you're playing Christian McCaffrey as quarterback? Like, it kind of you kinda
Makes
need
me
to look
laugh.
yeah, kinda need to look at yourself there and need to I it really needs, like, like, I don't wanna say investigated, but, like, it looked into, like, a lot more than it is, I would say.
And I will tell you that they have, and I want to give San Francisco the props. They fired their entire training staff at one point, and that was a few years back. I think that's when Sherman still played with them. Like, they cleared it out, and they're like, "What is happening?" I think there's multiple things. Number one, and probably the biggest one, is that he has players who are, as everyone likes to call them, they are dogs. They fight to the end.
Yeah,
Like, they go
okay.
hard and they hit hard and they're fast. And that's the type of team he likes to run. Well, and he does. He should, because it works, right? But you're going to be more injury prone if you have those type of players on there. I will say too, I do question sometimes, what does their rotation look like? What are they
Yeah,
doing maybe in practice? But at the same time, injuries happen. They just seem to happen in San Francisco a lot. And I think that it's not Shanahan's. I'm not saying it's Shanahan's fault in any way, shape, or form, but I would look at what is the commonality there. And it does seem to be pretty serious. But then you look at some of these other teams. Arizona's the same. Like, every single year. The Rams this year, I mean, they were on their fourth and fifth O lineman at some point. I think that, so
yeah.
I think it happens. And I think some years are pretty bad, but it just seems to always kind of gut San Francisco. And so they just can't quite get there. I did see something that's going to irritate some people. There was a great meme, and it was a picture of Colin Kaepernick. It says, until, whatever the quote is, it's like, until you fix what you've done to me, your curse will last forever, or something like that. I laughed so hard, but that's not it, obviously. But I do think that it was interesting that that was brought up in the media, because I do think it's a bit, it gets them every year at the end of the year.
Yeah,
It does,
it
for sure.
does, yeah, and Graham's right, we should not mention Sean McDermott as well. I don't
Mhm.
really think he should be in coach of the year either, to be
Great
honest.
team. Mhm.
They're a great team, but he has a great team.
Mhm.
And I feel like they're also slightly underachievers with the roster they have. Like, people are now starting to question if they've missed their Super Bowl window. I said the same thing about the Rams a few years ago, and then they went all in to get
Right.
to get the Super Bowl with Stafford last season. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering if that's something the Bills will maybe go down, but then hopefully they won't do the same as the Rams where they have no first draft pick until like
Yeah.
2025 or whatever. Um, but yeah, I feel for such a stacked team, many of Buffalo's games were a lot closer than they should have been this year. Like, they only beat the Lions by 3, and I feel like the Bills are, yeah, not going in the trajectory I want them to go because I
Right.
love the Bills and I want
I
them to.
like the Bills too. I saw yesterday on Twitter, and I get a lot of this stuff on Twitter, and I don't give credit back to them because I don't want a bunch of hate coming to some of these people, but someone compared them to Green Bay, is that they are always in it. They're always in the playoffs, often to the AFC, NFC championship, like that level, just can't quite get there. And that
Yeah,
breaks my heart, because that fan base has already lived through that, right?
I know,
They lived
I
through
love
that in the
them.
90s. And so I
They just stole
hope,
a trophy.
and I think Von Miller would have made a difference in that last game, but
Yeah,
you could just feel that
absolutely.
they just didn't seem to have a spark in that last
No.
game. And I asked yesterday on Twitter during the game, I'm like, if this is how Cincinnati started, what happened? What happened in Buffalo? And I got the snow, I got coaching, I got a bunch of different answers, but what the answer ended up being is that no one knows. And so it'll be
Mhm.
interesting to kind of see what happens with them at some point. So, all right, should we answer our questions?
We have a few. We
We
have a
have a
few
couple.
today.
We do.
So
Go ahead.
no, Graham, that's not nice. Come on.
Yeah, that's not nice at all. Hello, Dolphins. When was the last time you won one at all? So I'm just saying. When was the last time you got there, Graham? My beloved Graham, my friend Graham. Just teasing,
No,
sweetie.
we don't like that. We love the Bills in here.
He doesn't.
I
Understandably, he's a Dolphins fan. I get it. It's
know,
like
I
me
get
and the
it.
Niners.
I get it. I get it.
I get it.
Okay, so we have like 2 questions from I wanna say Brendan. That's what
Mhm.
I'm gonna go with 'cause his
Brendan.
Brendan rather than Brandon. Brendan. He said, his first question is, what position groups of need should Seattle
Mhm.
that's a tongue twister. Should Seattle focus on in the free agency versus the draft?
So, I actually we just did a whole podcast on this last week because free agency is fascinating to me, and because, like you brought up, Shona, the last 3 teams who have won the Super Bowl went all in free agency. And instead of, they've built up these young kids, but they went all in on free agency. And so what is then there are 2 schools of thought. You go all in on free agency and then you got nothing for a while, or you slowly build and try and find these blue chip players, through the
Hmm.
drafts. 2 schools of thought, neither are wrong. I will say this, when you look at Seattle though, their areas of need, a lot of them are actually very strong in this draft, especially defensive end, right? And so they don't have to go free agency. They will probably be able to pick up some really good players in the draft in some of their areas of need. The one area that in my opinion, and opinion of a lot of other people I have seen, where they need to go spend some money and go find somebody is at linebacker. And
Mhm.
that is because the linebacker position, especially after Bobby Wagner was let go, understandably, money-wise, I get what they were doing, but they lost, no offense, Cody Barton, all their talent level at that point, right? Jordan Brooks, fantastic. He does well. He's the
Great.
up-and-comer, injured. They don't think he's going to be back for a while into next season.
No.
And so therefore, they have to
Okay.
find someone to come in. Cody Barton is not your start. He's not a starting linebacker. He's fine rotationally, and he had some good plays, but he also had a lot of really bad plays. And so I think that that's where Seattle should go in and really spend some money, is probably at linebacker.
Cool. So the second question that Brendan has, it's
Mm-hmm.
so he's talking about how he knows a lot more about hockey than American football,
Mm-hmm.
and he's saying while it is a rough sport, like fighting's not really common. So he's asking what Trent Williams did to get ejected last night seems suspendable, maybe for 2 games or so.
Trent Williams is a pain in the butt. God love him. He's a pain in the butt. Trent Williams has this history of our fighting with people, and Seahawks fans will know this because remember after the 2012 season in the playoffs when the Seahawks lost to the Washington Commanders, that was not their name at the time. They he picked a fight with Richard Sherman. And so we're used to this, right? Like he shoved Richard Sherman. It was a whole thing. So this is what Trent Williams does. He's kind of that way. But here's the thing. There are all kinds of different levels of personal fouls, right? And so you have unnecessary roughness, unsportsmanlike conduct, a lot of those. Then things come subheadings under that, roughing the passer, running the kicker, that sort of thing. Unsportsmanlike conduct is just when they're doing something that is against sportsmanlike conduct, which, throwing someone to the ground probably is considered.
You think he also watched the Royal Rumble on Saturday?
I think he did. So then he and the Eagles player both got ejected because the Eagles player popped back up and threw a punch. Now you can't do that either, right? And so they were both ejected. The game was over at that point. It didn't really matter. But when it comes to suspensions, that a lot of times is up to NFL discretion. So I think that they will probably let this one go. It was at the end of the season. I think he will get a nasty fine. They both will. And of course, then you have to look at previous, violations. They will take all of that into consideration, but I don't think he'll be suspended for that. I think at the long off season, they're done for the year. He'll come in next year. It's possible they give him 1 game, but I don't think so. I think they just realized that tempers were flaring, and there had been a lot going on before that. It's not like he walked up to the dude who was just walking away, grabbed him, and threw him. So I think that they'll take that into consideration.
Didn't just walk on and choke slam him.
Right, right.
just in the
Although
mood.
he might. I mean,
He
he gets
might,
a
to
little
be fair.
hot-headed, that one does,
Yeah,
so
he might. There has been a trajectory of NFL players going into the WWE, so maybe he's the perfect candidate.
maybe he is. He
And
definitely
then,
does.
um, and then the part 2 of another question, it's part 2 of that question. He
Mhm.
says, "What level does size differential play?" So again, in hockey, player size range is much smaller than in football, so being about 5'11" to 6'4" versus 6'1" to 6'6".
So I'm reading this question is if Trent Williams, being 300 pounds, ginormous, had walked up to tiny little Tyler Lockett, picked him up and threw him around, would that matter? No, I don't think it would matter. I think that it would be the same type of it would be sad. But because I mean you have players that are anywhere from 5'9" to 6'6" in the NFL, it has to be the same. So I don't think that'll make any difference to it.
So this is actually a really good question from
Mhm.
Peter. It's gross for me to ask this, so we can understand if maybe not a Niners or a Seattle fan. If Geno was the 49ers QB, could they have beaten the Eagles?
Um, if Gino was the 49ers quarterback, would he have been healthy? I mean, we don't know, right? Like that line seemed to get their players pretty well
Yeah,
beat up. But I think the consistency would have helped. But I think we were seeing some consistency from Brock Purdy. I think that the
absolutely.
veteran knowledge of
Yeah.
him would have greatly helped. I think that the way he would have, kind of looked and schemed a little bit would have been a big help for that. But I don't know. The weird thing about the Niners is you just don't know who's going to be there at the end of the season. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the one thing I noticed about Brock Purdy, and I feel like even if it wasn't Geno, just a more experienced
Just a
quarterback
little,
because
yeah.
yeah, I felt like even in particular in the Seattle game, I could see the nerves because also he's a young guy. He's never been in this position before,
Hmm.
and I feel like you could totally see his like clockwork going in his head and like thinking like, what's my next move and how am I going to do this and blah blah blah. Which in an NFL sort of situation when you're in the playoffs, you can't really be that thinking that methodically
Hmm.
sometimes. So I think yeah, you're right. You're right there. I not just Geno. I feel like it was any quarterback
Hmm.
that had that little bit more experience. If they stayed healthy, then yeah, they could have beat the
Yeah.
Eagles.
I think so. The Eagles did show a couple holes yesterday. So it's
They
totally
did.
possible. In chat, I see there Peter has a follow-up too. He says, do the Seahawks take a flyer on Tanner Muse since he was restricted free agent? I don't see why not. I don't think that they really saw enough at it, unless in practice the coaches are seeing things they don't like or tendencies that they don't like. But I mean, he'll be real cheap. So why not?
And then we have this one from Graham. I don't know if we're calling them either of them.
No.
I was going to go with Brother Bowl, but then I thought we already had the Brother Bowl.
Well, Philadelphia is a city of brotherly love.
Yeah, well, I
So
think
that would kind of fit both, I guess. That's fair.
we had the Shanahan
Um
Bowl. No, not the Shanahan. Not the Shanahan. Shanahan doesn't have a brother. Well, he might do, but not in the NFL. I mean, we had the Harbaugh Bowl. Harbaugh
the
Bowl,
Harbaugh Bowl.
the Brother
Yeah.
Bowl.
Yeah.
Could have
I
another
guess if I
bowl.
had to pick one of those two, I'd probably pick the Andy Reid Bowl just because I
Oh,
think he
absolutely.
deserves higher billing than the Kelsey brothers.
I do too.
But
I do
but I
too.
do think that it's kind of fun. It's the first time ever that brothers have played against each other. Jason Kelsey, again, who I love and adore. Jason Kelsey posted yesterday on Twitter, I am no longer a Chiefs fan. It's like, yeah, I bet you're not, Jason.
I
I bet
love
you're
that.
not. I know. It was
I
so
love that.
funny.
Yeah, I would go if I had to vote, it would be a definitely Andy Reid Bowl.
Yeah.
Although I just noticed, right? I'm wearing, I don't know, a Philadelphia Phillies jumper. Hold on, where is it there?
Oh, yeah, you are.
But it's also red, so I feel like it's not a good omen for either team because I jinx everyone this year.
Oh man, it's true. Hey, I got one of my two predictions right. I said that the Eagles would beat the Niners. I really thought Cincinnati would pull it off at the last
I
minute like
do.
they had in the past.
Yeah,
But yeah.
yeah, I thought so too. I would have loved to have seen them back in the
Yeah.
Super Bowl, but I feel like as Graham said in our comments, the Burrowhead comment, I think that totally got to the Chiefs and that totally riled them up.
Okay, I live here. Keep in mind. And I'm like, I don't get it. But they're like Burrowhead. I'm like, Burrowhead. And I don't know why I didn't. I'm like, oh, Arrowhead. Like I didn't put it together first, and then I felt real stupid. But I was just like, oh. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, he has beaten them there a couple times.
Well, he has quite a lot.
But yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Luck could change there.
Yeah.
So, all right, everyone. Well, that is our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, we are going to be gone for a while. I'm on vacation. Liz is on vacation. Shona's on. We're all gone for a minute. So
I'm
there
getting
will
married.
not. Huh?
I'm getting married.
Yeah, you're
Lots
well.
of things to
Yeah,
do.
you got a few minutes before you get married. I hope so. Anyway, but we will be back at the end of February. I think is when we will be back. So we won't be doing a post Super Bowl show. We are going to go ahead. I think it's the 27th of February. We will be back. I think that's the date. And we are going to wrap up the Super Bowl really quick. But then we're going to dive into end of the year, end of the NFL year, which comes that second week of March. So we're going to dive into that and what we expect. Will Aaron Rodgers get traded? Will we see, will Geno Smith have a new contract? Will they start to do any trades prior to that? So that's going to be really interesting end of year. So we're going to dive into that. And once again, that's at the end of February. So thanks everyone. I want to thank all the people in our chat who gave us such good questions and we appreciate them. And we'll see you guys in a few weeks.
Thank you, everyone.